I thought we'd start actually with the images on the shrine. So what you have there is Shakyamuni Buddha touching the earth. You know, that is probably the central Buddhist image, is where the Buddha is touching the earth, and there's a whole story attached to that moment, but it's often sort of the image for the moment of enlightenment itself. And Shakyamuni is thought to be the best way of thinking about it is that moment is the moment of the perfection of wisdom, the dawning of the perfection of wisdom. Yeah. Every genuine Buddhist practice, every genuine approach to the Buddha Dharma is an approach to the perfection of wisdom, to the arising of the perfection of the wisdom. And the perfection of wisdom is a new kind of consciousness, one that goes beyond the rational mind and the physical senses. Although even that, as soon as the word beyond there is a metaphor. Actually the way you go beyond the senses is through the senses, but let's just park that for a minute. You can get lost in metaphysics very easily. But all of Buddhism, all of the practices, right from just there, just relaxing into your body, and is a preparation for the arising of the perfection of wisdom. If the perfection of wisdom arises in you, you become a new kind. You live in, inhabit a new kind of consciousness, and that new kind of consciousness is experienced by others as a source of good for the world. It's experienced by others as compassion. The Buddha isn't being compassionate. The Buddha is just being himself. Like you're being yourself, you're not trying to act in a particular way. It's just how people experience the Buddha being himself. In other words, being established in the perfection of wisdom, is your experience of him would be of endless compassion, endless creativity, endless energy. But he was just being himself. Yeah? For him, it's no special thing. It's just his way of being. That's what I mean by a new consciousness, in which the perfection of wisdom is your natural being in the world. It's not some metaphysical thing you've got into. It's just how you naturally are. It's because you've seen things as they really are. Yeah? And therefore, once you see things as they really are, that's how you behave. That's classical Buddhism for you. Yeah. And it's interesting because behind the figure is the figure of Amitabha, an archetypal figure, a red figure, and Amitabha is primarily a figure of compassion, yeah, a figure of love, a figure of compassion. And I like the way it's been arranged because there is no perfection of wisdom without positive emotion, to put it very sort of prosaically, yeah. That the way one prepares for the perfection of wisdom is not by studying arcane texts or doing a philosophy degree or reading about late Buddhist metaphysics. The way you prepare for the perfection of wisdom to arise is by cultivating love. Yeah? And love is the expression of the perfection of wisdom as well. So what I want to do tonight is mostly talk about the cultivation of love, except for I need to sort of put some more detail on that because it's easy to misunderstand what I mean about that. Just at the LBC, we're doing a meditation challenge there, and we're studying, I'm using 4 lines from a Perfection of Wisdom text, a late Buddhist text. And the first thing it says is, call forth as much as you can of love. Yeah? Call forth as much as you can of love. And what I've been saying at the LBC is the striking thing about that first little sentence is it's not develop as much as you can of love, but call forth as much as you can of love. And the metaphor there is that it's already there. You just need to call it forth. Yeah? Not that you need to develop it, that you haven't got it, that you're basically bad. The westernized assumption is if you go deeply into yourself, you discover all those Freudian nightmares, those dark shadows and creepy crawlers. The Buddhist vision is if you go deep enough, you discover love. You discover all the positives, yeah? and that all you need to do is call forth those things. So Buddhism represents a complete inversion of the Western tradition, pretty much. So how I've been talking about love, because love's a bit emotive as a word, and some people will relate to that and some people won't. How I've been talking about that is mostly in terms of what we need to develop for the perfection of wisdom to arise is strength of mind and moral beauty. Yeah? Strength of mind and moral beauty. Now, I'll say something about those in the second half. But I think sometimes in our teaching we haven't stressed enough the need for a strength of mind. Strength of mind is to do with staying with your experience long enough so that you can get an insight into your experience. That's what strength of mind is about. That's why we teach the mindfulness of breathing on the meditation challenge, so that you can stay with experience long enough. And if you stay with your experience long enough, your experience will change. Like, all you need to do to have a spiritual experience, folks, is stay with your breath long enough. That's all you need to do. Yeah? If you could just sit for 10 minutes and just watch your breath, your mind would naturally open out. You'd feel naturally extremely happy, even blissful. You'd feel very unified and concentrated. And when you came out of the meditation, the world would look beautiful. Yeah? And that's not because you've read a Buddhist text. It's not because you've studied Eastern philosophy. It's just because you've watched your breath. The big issue is, how do you stay with your experience? How do you cultivate strength of mind? Yeah? But I'd like us to be sort of emphasizing that more, that what we're trying to do is a sort of corollary of the kind of thing that you're doing in the gym, where you're trying to develop strength of body. You're trying to develop strength of mind, which is much more demanding than strength of body. You can see I'm a picture of, I am hedge under this jacket, I tell you. But, developing strength of mind is much more difficult than developing strength of body, although you need to do both, probably. Anyway, I'll come back to that in the second half. But when I was thinking about that more, I thought, and I want to talk about moral beauty in the second half particularly, but when I thought about that more, I thought, actually, there's something more fundamental than those two, strength of mind and moral beauty. I think those are largely what we're trying to develop in our life all the time, the strength of mind and moral beauty. But there's something that those two things rest on, which is more difficult to talk about, for us at least, westernized people, because we're so weird. There's no nicer way of putting it. We are like the weirdest generation ever. We're the first generation for instance, to live, really the first generations to live without faith in some transcendental figure or being or world. Even when I grew up, I used to go to the church twice a week, 3 times a week. I sang in the church choir. My family wasn't very religious, but there was still the sense of the presence of something divine, even if you didn't believe in it. Even the fact you didn't believe in it was a kind of presence. The other night I went to see Marty Supreme, was it? Is that the right? Sounds really weird. Anyway, it was worth seeing. But what struck me about it is an incredible portrait of modern life, because it's lavishly done, incredibly acted. Every face, every scene, every costume is agonized over, whoever directed it. Apparently they're well known. Anyway, your man, what's his name?
Josh Safdie.
He's very good. That's the director, isn't it? Yeah. And whoever played the lead part. Thank you. He's very good as well. But what's really struck me about it, it's 2.5 hours long, something like that, really, really engaging, but it's not about anything apart from what it's about. At one point I was thinking, is this about war? Is this about the fallout of the Second World War? No, not really. Is this about, the American dream? No, not really. It is just about what it's about. And I was very struck by that, because all the work into the film has gone into this kind of incredible creation of the 1960s in New York. It goes to New York, Tokyo, Paris, London. Amazingly done, like an epic, except for it doesn't mean anything more than what it says. I thought that was really interesting, that we're pouring all of this beauty and talent and incredible direction, just to say, yeah, life's just what it is. So if I eat a banana, that's all that's happening. Yeah. So let's do it. Let's really film it really well. Let's light it gorgeously. But that's all that's happening. In the film, there's no metaphorical meaning. There's no deeper significance. I don't think the directors were reaching for some universal kind of parable about modern life. It was just saying, this is what life is like. It's one thing after another. That's all. There was no absent divinity, no absent anything. It was just historiosity, living in history, in time. That's all there is. Boom. Yeah, that's what the film, I thought, was brilliantly done. But as a picture of modern life, I thought very perturbing. It was using all the tropes of epic to tell you nothing apart from the fact that he eventually does go and play in Tokyo. And that isn't a spoiler. It'd be very difficult to do a spoiler, actually. But it's great. Go and see it. A little film crit there. So for me, you can't imagine how silly that is. That idea that we human beings are creatures only of history and the accidents of history, that our lives are merely what we do in the literal sense. No other generation until very recently has ever tried to live like that. And it's not working. That kind of idea of, like Marty Supreme, he's basically just trying to get what he wants, and he's incredibly skilled and manipulative and even destructive about how he does that. And there's no critique of that even. That's what being alive means, just trying to get what you want, get more for me. But it just has not worked. The secular, materialist race has just not worked. What we're missing, my own gloss on it is that we're so dazzled by what we have in modern life that we haven't noticed how much we're missing. And I think we're primarily missing, I go on and on about it, but you're missing, one of the things we're missing, firstly, is a much more natural and much more given sense of being embodied, of living not just in some kind of cerebral world of thought and willpower and pushing to get what you want and not get what you don't want, but we live as embodied creatures. I think we're weirdly lost a sense of that. And it's interesting, there's lots of people doing yoga and more people going to the gym than ever. When I was young, nobody did that, really, and it was very unusual. Everybody goes to the gym now, which in many ways is great and much better than my childhood. But there's a sort of weirdly extrinsic attitude to the body, as if your body is more like an expensive car that you want to show off, rather than something that you live through. So even our sort of modern concern with the body is weirdly cerebral, I think. So we've lost this sort of sense of being embodied in a very simple way. So then I think we've lost a sense of community. Human beings are communal creatures. That's what we are. What I'm noticing, particularly with young people, is just how many young people are experiencing social anxiety. Nearly every young person I meet nowadays say they experience social anxiety. And part of that's to do with the fact that we are communal beings and we've lost how to do that. It's suddenly become something we have to kind of think through. The contemporary word for it now is we're deracinated, which is a very posh word, and you could use it in your next conversation at work. You can say, well, we are deracinated, and everyone will go, ooh! It means uprooted, basically. We're uprooted from place and from community. And remember that mammals, for instance, are as attached to their lair or their nest as they are to their mother. So we're a large mammal, so place and community is absolutely crucial for human well-being. Absolutely crucial to human well-being. And most of us don't live where we were born. I come from a small town where, my my parents, my father came from there, my father's father came from, whole prehistory of my family are all buried in the same churchyard, which I'm not going to, because I couldn't wait to get out of the place. Anyway, I grew up with the vestiges of a community, but we've lost a sense of community. What we've got now is communication without community, haven't we? We're obsessed with communication, especially through our devices, but what we've created is a world of communication without community. Interesting, we started there with a short ritual of bowing to the shrine. What that does is create community without communication. Yeah. What ritual does is it creates a deep sense of community without any communication. Yeah. You just do the prescribed, formula for the ritual, and that creates community. And it's what we're trying to do here at the Brixton Buddhist Centre is create a new kind of community, which is local, which is place-based, which is person-based, which is somewhere where you come and feel you know people, that you feel known, that you can relax, you've got something valuable to do here. That is literally what I say we, I'm not really doing it, I'm doing it in Bethnal Green, I'm doing it around, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a new kind of community, a new place where you feel at home, because you will not flourish as a person without a real sense of community. Yeah? And until very recently, nobody would have even mentioned that, because everybody was living like that. For the great time of history, all human beings have lived like that. Yeah? And then finally, we've lost a sense of cosmic connection. Yeah? And I think of all our losses, remember we're dazzled by what we have and haven't noticed what we've lost. What we've lost particularly is a sense of cosmic connection, that we're in a universe that is alive with a kind of consciousness, which we are significant actors in, that we can feel ourselves in relationship with a natural world, for instance, a natural world that was configured as being alive and conscious in some analogous way to us. It didn't think that, people didn't go and run out and hug trees. They just felt a natural kinship with the natural world and a natural sense of what the Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor calls cosmic connection, that you feel that you're part of something infinitely larger than yourself, which gives your life meaning and value. Human beings throughout history and across all religious divides have always felt that as a kind of primary experience, that my humanness is part of something much, much bigger, a kind of cosmic bigger, something much bigger which shines through the universe, shines through the natural world, which I'm a part of and I can articulate with. Yeah? Human beings have felt that until very, very recently, historically, and then we've decided that we felt all that, and then science showed us we were wrong. Yeah? That's what we sort of think that's where we've got to now. But of course science hasn't shown us we were wrong at all. Actually, that's not science's job. Science's job is to do experiments and discover what's right. Yeah? So I think before we can even cultivate a sense of strength of mind and moral beauty, we need to rediscover our nature. And our nature is physical, first of all, embodied, not this terribly one-sided cerebral nature that we've developed in the westernized world. It's communal and local. Always human beings have been communal and local. Never before have you been able to know the horrible, terrifying things going on in the rest of the world. You had your locality, yeah? That's where you lived, and that's where you helped or didn't help. Human beings are always communal and local. We're, as I say, very attached to place. It's how we feel well. It's how we feel at home, literally. Yeah? And we've lost that, and we need to build a new community, and that's what we're trying to do now. And we've lost a sense of cosmic connection. Yeah? The Charles Taylor's book, which is I wouldn't massively recommend because it's about that thick, it's huge. But it's particularly about romantic poetry, the romantics like Wordsworth and Coleridge and so on. And what they do in their poetry is they sort of evoke a sense of cosmic connection without making any claims about what you're connected to. Because we've also, remember, pretty much most people now, I think, cannot believe in God anymore. Some people still can, but mostly I think that metaphor has broken and we can't believe in God anymore. But with jettisoning God, we've jettisoned a whole sense of cosmic connection. God stood for the place of cosmic connection. Yeah? That we felt ourselves to be in a living, even benign universe, even with some kind of purpose. And if you look at modern philosophy and modern thinking now, from Bernardo Kastrup to Ian McGilchrist to Rupert Sheldrake, all these people, more and more people are starting to point this out. Metaphysical materialism, our westernized worldview, is very, very much on the end of its trajectory now. Yeah. So rather than talk about that more, what I thought we'd do is try and actually rediscover that now in meditation. Our connection with our bodies, our connection with each other as a local community, and then our cosmic connection. So I don't know whether I managed to express that well enough, but to see where I'm trying to go to with this is we need to get back to our nature, which is not split off and cerebral and weirdly noisy. It's embodied, yeah, and open to a whole range of experience. It's not this weird, modern, split-off, cerebral, analytic, extrinsic, abstracted creature modern people have become. Yeah? We're trying to get back to our nature, which is embodied. We're trying to get back to our nature that we're not isolated individualists pursuing our own aims relentlessly at our own expense and often at others' expense, but we're communal creatures who always live in companionship and company with others. A very important philosopher, modern philosopher, A.N. Whitehead, this is his great contribution to philosophy, is he thought the philosophers has looked at the person as if they were an isolated being. But human beings are always in concert with others. And human beings, until recently, have had that natural sense of their parents, their forefathers, etc., that was a living experience of communal, not as a split-off, individual, self-centered ego trying to move its way through a crowd to get what it wants, but a communal creature trying to work together with others and get what we need, not just what I want. And that's not an ideology, it's not even really Buddhism, really. It's just nature. It's what we really are. We're local, communal creatures who thrive through that. Yeah? And we've broken off from that and thought that we're separate, isolated individuals. That we now have an epidemic of loneliness. Yeah? And then thirdly, we're trying to get back to our nature of being connected intrinsically with the natural world, not through, environmental ideology, valuable though that may or may not be. There's something much deeper than that, which is that our body, our selves, are an instance of nature. We've grown out of nature. We're not separate from nature. It's just that we've weirdly forgotten that. As I say, the water in the clouds is the water we drink. It's the water of our blood. We have streams running through us. The food we eat, all of that, we're exchanging ourselves with the natural world all the time. But we've kind of alienated ourselves from that. We've decided we're too clever to be part of a cosmic order. We've separated ourselves, isolated and alienated ourselves from these larger forces. They're all just basic instincts that human beings have had until we sort of all went collectively mad. We all had them, that we were embodied, not cerebral, that we were communal, not isolated, and that we were part of a much greater whole, not mere sort of, mistakes of brain function. Yeah. So all we're trying to do there in that little meditation is try and get back to nature, our nature, and we try to develop from there. And the next thing we need to develop is moral beauty. So I just want to very briefly recap. So the whole of Buddhism is about either creating the conditions in which the perfection of wisdom can arise, or it's expressing the perfection of wisdom. Anything that's not doing that isn't really Buddhism, it's something else. Yeah. So where I was starting was, okay, what we need for the perfection of wisdom is primarily love, or as Bhante Sangharakshita, the founder of our movement, puts it, positive emotion. But the language of positive emotion is a bit, I find a bit thin. Positive is too positive, and emotion is too emotional. So I wanted, but I know what he's getting at, so that's all right. But what I wanted to emphasize is, first of all, we need to reconnect with something very fundamental which we have forgotten. We're so dazzled by what we have in modernity, from iPhones to intercontinental travel, that we've forgotten that we're embodied creatures, not extrinsic analytic ones who live in abstractions and live on the screen. We've forgotten that we're communal creatures and we're creatures of place and locality, and that without that we become unhealthy, and that does seem to be what you're seeing. This epidemic of loneliness that people are talking about and so on. We've forgotten our communal nature, and you can understand that because communities, whilst fostering all of those positive things, also can often keep you trapped. I come from a small town in Henley. I was the only gay in the village, except for I discovered later I wasn't, but that's another story. I discovered, alas, too late. But one of the reasons why I came to London, came to live in Brixton, was so I could be openly gay. I just couldn't possibly have done that in a small town in Warwickshire. Yeah. So communities can be stifling. That's the great problem of communities, and they often don't allow for difference. Yeah, they often close in around national types and so on. Yeah, that's what can happen with communities. So we were right to be concerned about that, but we cannot do without community. We just can't. Modernity is showing that only too vividly, that we cannot be healthy and not be creatures of community and place. We've just forgotten that. We need to create a new community in a new place, and that is what we're trying to do here at the Brixton Buddhist Centre. It's what I'm trying to do at the LBC. It's what I'm going to go to Berlin soon, and a friend of mine is the chair of the Berlin Centre, and it's what they're trying to do over there. Yeah, create place and community, but a place and community that doesn't stultify growth and allows for difference. Yeah, rather than disavows difference. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And finally, as I say, we've forgotten our nature, which is part of nature. It's weird. People keep telling me I feel I like getting out in nature, and you think, and what do you think you are exactly? It is really odd how we talk about nature as if we're a computer, and it's really good to put that computer in a field somewhere, and then the computer feels better. It's actually really weird, isn't it? We are nature, getting out in nature at the very least. Yeah, we have the way to have a deeper kinship with the natural world is to have a deeper experience of your body, because your body is nature. You don't need to go anywhere. There it is. You're living in nature, and if you connect with that more and more deeply, and not in this extrinsic, analytic, hyper self-conscious way, you'll find that you'll feel more natural empathy, natural connection with the natural world, because you are part of it, and you will go back into it. And then finally, this larger sense of cosmic connection. I like Taylor's sort of words for that cosmic connection. The human beings have always felt part of some infinitely larger whole that they can propitiate, they can praise, they can worship, they can feel connected with. You particularly experience that at death, when with the funeral rite. I've been to contemporary funerals which are sort of secular, and they're just an embarrassment. I went to one and I felt like standing up and complaining, which would be rude. But it was positively weird. It was at the Ashmolean in Oxford, so I was the only person there who wasn't a professor. But it was proof that professors can be really stupid, because we had, a friend of ours had died. He was a professor himself, and everyone was talking, but they were all giving him. They were talking about his CV, and then he wrote this, and then he wrote this for the Guardian, and I wanted to say, that wicker thing behind you, that's his body. Wouldn't it be good to reference that? It was really weird and really stupid. I'm afraid I can't think of a nicer word. We've so lost sense of our instincts that we're part of something larger, that death is not the end, that we can talk to the dead, that one's parents and forebears are with you all the time, that death is a journey into the unknown. All these things that human beings have just felt naturally, and I know you can ideologize those feelings, but they're feelings, they're experiences. They don't start as dogmas. Dogmas can be made out of them, but there's a deep sense of connectedness with the dead. To have got rid of those instincts so much, so that where someone's body is actually in the room, all you can do is talk about their CV. I thought it was a terrible indictment of modern life, that we've lost, as Wordsworth said, we've given our hearts away. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. He was completely right. We've given our hearts away. So positive emotion starts with something much more that Buddhism doesn't even think to mention very often. I mean, it's there in the whole of Buddhism, because the Buddha taught in an animistic world that was, he conceived of, everybody conceived it as being alive with spirits and so on. But we have to find a new way back to our nature. We won't be able to do it, we can sentimentalize that, I know, but we won't be able to do it in the way that pre-modern people do it. We need to find a way back to community, back to a cosmic connection, and back to the body, before we even think of cultivating strength of mind or moral beauty. They're our birthright that we've disavowed because we're so enamored with our iPhones, basically. A lot more to say about that, but I'll try and resist. So I was going to say more about strength of mind, but perhaps we'll leave that for another time. The important thing about strength of mind is that we need to be able to stay with our experience long enough to gain an insight into our experience. The way beyond the senses is through the senses. There isn't a beyond, really. Beyond is a kind of metaphor. All of these things are metaphors, really, finally. But I need to be able to stay in life, in embodied life, long enough to see into its nature. That's really what meditation is about. It's staying in life. And by life I mean experience suffused with awareness, staying in that long enough to get an insight into it. Including staying with your reactions to things, your discomfort about things, your sense of threat. Can we sort of stay with that rather than go up into telling stories about that, who's right, who's wrong, who I agree with, who I don't agree with, whether I feel righteous or not righteous, but stay with our experience long enough to gain an insight into it. That's really what strength of mind is. And I include that under the rubric of positive emotion. You see, in the words don't seem to cover that, really. You need a sort of more of a drawing out of it. And then, lots I could say about moral beauty, but I only want to look at one thing, which I've been teaching a bit recently, partly because it's been such a issue in my own life, and that is this part of moral beauty. I was saying that Amitabha is the Buddha of love. He radiates love. In the ancient Buddhist sutras, the Buddha is described as just sort of sitting there and emanating love. He would, the very earliest teachings of what is called the Maitreyabandhu were you just sit there and you radiate love in all directions. How hard can it be? Well, it seems to be the ancient idea, obviously, anyway, when you try and do it, it doesn't work so well, does it? So I think this matter of love is very is crucial, and I want to focus on that. And especially, and slightly weirdly, I want to focus on feeling loved rather than loving, yeah? Because feeling loved is foundational to being able to create moral beauty, yeah? You can do it without it, but it's very, very difficult. I think Buddhism assumes that you're already a happy, healthy human being, and that you want to develop beyond that. What modern people come to Buddhism with very, very uneven. That's the thing I notice in a certain sense, I think even more and more in a certain way, that people come to Buddhism now and they're very, very uneven. They're either intellectually superpowered but emotionally stupid, or at least foolish, or stupid will do. That word's coming up a lot. Either they're intellectually wonderful but emotionally kind of stunted almost, or you get people who are very, very emotional but haven't got two thoughts to rub together. That's just as true. It's not as popular a truth, but it is true. I can tell you. I can name names. I won't. But we are trying to think, folks. We're not just trying to sort of be in some sort of weird cosmic way. So you see how we come to Buddhism very, very uneven. You meet people who are wonderfully skilled, with technology, but have no table manners, etc., etc. People come to Buddhism now very, very uneven, very unevenly developed. Parts of themselves very developed, other parts of themselves hardly touched at all. The obvious ones are those between emotion and thought. So one of the ways that I want to talk about approaching that tonight is through this sense of being loved, yeah? And that's kind of foundational to feeling relaxed, for one thing. If you're loved by your parents, what children who are loved feel is relaxed, pretty much. They don't get stressed. They don't problematize things. Children who are loved go and trash the joint because they're safe to. They don't need to cling to their parents. They're not needy and sort of neurotic. They just adventure because they know they're loved. Yeah. So I think a lot of people come to Buddhism without a very stable sense of being loved. Even though they almost certainly have been, you don't necessarily feel that you have been. And the reason why, as I say, this is something that's been on my mind is because it's very much my own experience. I come from a large family. I have 3 older brothers and a younger sister. My parents were very poor when I was young. They were working all the time. My sense growing up was one of not being loved. It's not actually true because my parents did love me very much, I think, but I didn't feel that, or I didn't notice it when they did, yeah? And I don't think I'm alone in that. I meet people who I feel have not had very many figures in their life that just love you for who you are, without you having to achieve something, be someone, do well at school, do well at sport, whatever it is. My kind of loved figure is my grandmother, who died when I was 8, and I used to have breakfast in the kitchen and just run next door where she lived, and I'd spend the whole day with my grandmother, and she just thought I was great. I could do no wrong. She once said to my mother that I had character, and that I would therefore be all right. Anyway, but when you're very small, you kind of know that you're loved. My grandmother would never have expressed it. She was like an old Victorian, so she would never have picked me up. I don't suppose she would have said things to me or touched me even that much, or cuddled me or anything. But you always know that someone's intrinsically pleased to see you. And I would just follow her around the house, talking probably, knowing me, and she just seemed to, she just liked it. I remember she taught me how to dust by holding the duster on either end and doing between the rungs of a chair. I remember being very pleased learning how to dust. But I just felt beloved, if you see what I mean. And what that made me feel is very happy and very relaxed. I remember she once made me chips with cheese melted over it. And it was like the most glorious meal I've ever had. And it was, in my memory of it, is this bright yellow meal. It's surrounded this, she always had this very dark coal, she had a coal fire, so this, and with dogs, we had these huge Alsatians, this sort of musty, dark room with this sort of bright yellow chips and cheese. And I felt that lovely sense of ease, of happiness, of being loved, yeah? So one of the things that we need to, not everybody has had that. I think the other thing that I've been thinking about this is that saying that it takes a village to raise a child. So in other words, if your parents couldn't feel that much for you, or they had their own problems with that, your next door neighbours certainly could, or your grandmother was there, or your aunts and uncles everywhere and cousins everywhere. Children seem to be disappearing from the world. In some places now there are more dogs than children. You used to just go out with all your cousins and all of them around the same age. You'd be part again of a community, and you wouldn't even think I was part of a community. You were just living, and you'd feel safe in that world. You'd know you'd have all the fights and gossip and everything, but you'd know everybody. Everyone would know you. So many of us, I think, need to either bring back figures that loved you when you were, often when you were young. Weirdly now, my father's become very important to me in that way. He was very undemonstrative, so I just didn't notice it. But when I bring him to mind, he was always in the kitchen drinking tea and reading the newspaper, it seems, in my imagination. I can feel, as soon as I bring that to mind, I kind of relax a bit. Just his presence, he was always there. He always seemed to wear the same clothes, almost literally the case. And he was a very good man, my father, and he was just sort of there. Yeah. And one of the things we need to do is kind of reconnect with that sense of being loved, so that we can then cultivate moral beauty and love others. Yeah. It's very, very difficult to do that if you haven't felt loved. And so what we need to do is either imagine that we are now. You can imagine sitting in the presence of the Buddha and his love, or bring to mind figures in the past who have loved you, or bring to mind people around you just now who love you. But it's important, it's not because you're gorgeous, fat chance, if only. It's not because you're good at sport or anything like that. It's not for anything you might do, but just for yourself. With my grandmother, I was just her favourite, and I kind of weirdly knew that. I'm sure nobody would have said so. And when you get in touch with that, what you'll find immediately is it helps you relax. It helps you, to use psychological language, it helps you regulate your experience. Yeah. So before we can develop moral beauty, or alongside that, because actually often it's our love of others and it's our giving to others that helps us find it in ourselves, we need to pay more, I think many people need to pay more attention to feeling loved. Yeah? If you could feel that, and you usually have been, it's just that you haven't noticed it. And remember, feeling loved isn't a foreground thing. Like my father's present in the kitchen, it's not that he said loving things to me. I used to shake his hand. That's about as physical I would ever was with him. Just before he died, I shook his hand. I'm English after all. But actually, there was lots of love in that. His presence there was lots of love in it. It's just very diffuse, if you see me. So you need to look for almost a background sense. It's not a foreground sense. It's not that it's not like those awful American films where someone says, "Do you remember when you were 6 and you came and you said, 'Daddy'?" It's not like that. It's not even anything remotely like that. It's like every time that scene comes on in America, I just think, "No, stop, no, it's not." Nobody actually does that. Anyway. So what we're going to do now is a meditation in which we just bring to mind figures that love us. All we need to do is make sure that's grounded in our body, so it's not just a fantasy. When I first started coming along to a class like this on a Wednesday night, isn't it? I cycled from my squat in Brixton over to the LBC, the Brixton Buddhist Centre didn't exist then. the first night I remember, having a real sense that this is wonderful. And then someone said, okay, there's a weekend retreat coming on, just go on that. And I just thought everybody would. I was a bit surprised that only I did. But anyway, so there's a weekend retreat. Is it the weekend? It is a weekend coming retreat at Vajrasana. That's really where you start to have you just need to give yourself a bit of chance to get away from your London mind and start to have experiences that convince you, not just somebody at the front convincing you. That's all very well, but you need experiences that convince you. So what I would suggest is you just do that retreat. Don't even think about it, just do that. You know it makes sense. And then we've got a course based on The Journey and the Guide, the book I wrote a few years ago. And the idea of that book, the reason I wrote that book, is to try to give people a kind of snapshot of the whole Buddhist life from where you are now to enlightenment itself, a kind of 8-week test drive of Buddhism. I kept meeting people who kept saying, I'm not religious, but if I was religious, I'd be a Buddhist. So I said, well, why don't you be a Buddhist then in that case? Duh. So the book came out of feeling like, okay, well, here you go, 8 weeks. At the end of that 8 weeks, you'll know whether you're a Buddhist or not. So there you go. What I would do is go on retreat with everyone from here, all go together. You just live together for a few days. It's amazing the difference that makes, much more than you'd anticipate. And then you try and live that out in your everyday life by going on the course here, all together again. By the end of that retreat in these 8 weeks, you have started to create this new kind of localism, this new kind of community, which is so fundamental to human well-being, that includes difference, but it also creates that sense of place and people. Yeah. So that's what I'd suggest you do next. Okay.